Chapter 11. Kayla. I so desperately wanted to believe what Anselm was saying, but everything in my past told me that he was lying. He had to be. There was no way that a prince like him, that had already left me once, wouldn't do it again. But when his lips touched mine, I couldn't pull back. In fact, I grabbed onto his shirt and hauled him closer. His arms went around my body and held me against him. His lips parted mine and his tongue swept in to taste me. I met his tongue with my own, giving back whatever he gave and losing myself in the moment. But when his hands began to free roam my body, I pulled back. That was enough. Anselm, I'm not sure this is a good idea. And if we went any further, I wasn't sure I'd be able to stop when I should. The prince got to his feet in front of me and began to undress. His eyes were almost silver, and his smile was contagious. I think it's a great idea. He unbuttoned his shirt, then dropped it to the ground, revealing his incredible abs and beautiful chest. I think the only way to convince you that I love every inch of that strong, gorgeous, luscious body is to love on you until you beg me to stop. He unbuttoned his pants and slid the zipper down. I couldn't stop watching him, and my mouth literally watered at the beauty before me. This doesn't lie. He gestured downward. You can think whatever you want, believe whatever you want, but you are never allowed to think that I don't want you. I dragged my gaze up to his face, where I could see his determination. He wasn't lying. I stood up and began to undress, needing to feel his skin against mine one more time. Anselm rushed forward, cupping my face and kissing me hard. I twisted out of his grasp and turned my back to him. Please, help me out of this. The dresses here were beautiful, but almost impossible to get in and out of without someone else to help you. Anselm drew the zipper down my back, then pressed his lips to my skin. I sighed, my eyes closing in the moment, trying to savor the sensation. The dress slid down my arms and whispered over my belly to the floor. God, you're beautiful, he said. I wasn't going to argue with my head dropped back and my hands in his hair, holding him against me. Lie on the bed for me, please. The urgency in his tone made me want to do whatever he asked. I need to taste you. His words made an embarrassed blush heat my face, but didn't stop me from doing exactly what he wanted. I walked around the bed and arranged the pillows so I could lie down comfortably. Then, as elegantly as one can do at 9 months pregnant, I rolled onto the mattress and lay down on the bed. I waited, my chest heaving with exertion and excitement. He kissed me, softly and tenderly, then disappeared from my view once more. I felt like a beached whale lying on my back like that. But then, something magical happened. Afterward, Anselm pulled me up into a cuddle with our heads resting on the pillows. It was one of the more peaceful moments of my existence. I couldn't keep my eyes open. I was too blissed and drugged out of my head with pleasure. The sound of our slowing breathing filled the air, and Anselm's lips were on my shoulder, against my neck. His hand cupped my breast, then gently moved down to hold my belly. The baby kicked against his hand, and I smiled when he jerked his hand away. It's okay, I said. You'll feel more here. I dragged his hand to the place I felt the most kicks, and the baby shifted and moved for its father. Wow, he whispered into my ear. I thought nothing would make this moment more perfect, and you just managed it. My heart squeezed tight in my chest. I had to tell him how I was feeling, or we weren't moving forward. He'd been honest with me, so I needed to do the same. I convinced myself we didn't need you. Over the last 7 or 8 months, I was so alone at first. Then, when I couldn't find you and had no idea if I was ever going to see you again, I decided I'd be the best single mom ever. Anselm kissed my hair. "Our child has the strongest mother there is. I'm so proud of you for getting through so much on your own." I nodded. I was proud of me too. I never thought I'd end up pregnant and abandoned, but it had happened, and I'd found a way to survive. I set up the nursery by myself. I saved money so I could take time off work. I was doing okay. "Of course you were," Anselm reassured me, though I was pretty sure that a prince from another universe, or whatever this was, had no idea what I was talking about. "Anselm, I'm trying to say—" He pulled back, and I rolled onto my back to look up at him. "I know what you're trying to say." He kissed my lips softly. "You went through hell because of me, and you would have been fine without me. Our baby would have had you, and they would grow up strong and independent, just like their mother." I nodded, a strange feeling in the pit of my stomach. He did get it. Sort of. "But I wouldn't have been okay," he whispered. "I would have died of loneliness, never knowing my mate or the baby we made together. So thank you for staying, even if you didn't feel like you had a choice. I thank you from the bottom of my heart." I was beginning to feel like I didn't understand this fated mate's link very well. The very idea of Anselm never marrying just didn't sit right with me. But now wasn't the time to ask. Lethargy had seeped into my limbs, and sleep pressed down upon me. I rolled onto my side and cuddled into his chest. "I can barely keep my eyes open." Anselm chuckled and wrapped his arms around my back. "Sleep, sweetheart. I'll be here when you wake up." The words tugged at my heart. He hadn't been there the first time we'd slept together, and a large part of me didn't expect him to be there when I woke up this time. After all, what had really changed? Chapter 12. Kayla. Despite my misgivings, when I awoke and looked up, Anselm was there, sound asleep. I still had my head on his chest, his heart beating beneath my ear. I smiled at the feeling of happiness still present in my heart, until a sudden wave of nausea rolled through me, and I gasped at the strange feeling. I hadn't been sick in months. What was this? Was it related to the baby? I sat up, afraid I was about to vomit on my lover. "You okay?" Anselm asked, reaching out to massage my shoulders. Another hot wave moved over me, and I rushed to slide my legs off the bed. "Feeling a bit sick. Be right back." I rushed to the bathroom to hang my head over the sink. I waited there for some time, as long as I could, but when I didn't throw up and the nausea began to subside, I splashed some water on my face. I sat on the toilet out of habit, and when I wiped, my bloody show was on display. I gaped down at the red and white mucus, knowing well that meant my labour wasn't far away. Well, they say sex is the best way to stimulate labour. I shook my head at my own sense of humour in the face of such a thing, cleaned up and headed out to the bedroom once more. I knew that even with the bloody show, my labour could be hours or days off, so I didn't say anything to Anselm, not wanting to ruin the moment. At this time it was just us, and I wanted to treasure the time with him, if not for anything else, then because I wanted memories that I could hold on to in the future. In case this didn't last. He slid to the edge of the bed and patted the spot next to him. "You feeling any better?" I swallowed hard, checked my stomach, and nodded. "Yeah, I think so. Not sure what that was, actually." "Is it the baby, do you think? Or maybe hunger?" Anselm looked concerned, as if he wanted me to say it was mere hunger, and not anything wrong because of the pregnancy. I tried to smile reassuringly. "Maybe just hunger. I think we may have missed dinner or lunch. What's the time, anyway?" He glanced over at the clock on the wall. "Around 4. We missed lunch. Definitely." He could definitely be right about the hunger because, as I moved around the bed and went to sit down beside him again, a fresh wave of sickness rolled over me. I gulped. I think you're right. I need to eat something." Anselm jumped up off the bed and reached for his robe. "Let me grab some clothes from my room real quick, then we can go and get something to eat. The chef will whip up whatever you like." I nodded, though the nausea had gotten stronger. I just needed a cup of tea or some toast and butter. Something plain to settle my stomach. Anselm helped me into a pale blue dress that Sadie had altered for me, then kissed my neck. "You look beautiful in these clothes." I turned to face him, smoothing the soft material around my baby bump. I must admit I like all the dresses. Very medieval. "Very royal," Anselm said with a grin, before dropping his head and kissing my lips in a smooth, affectionate, easy move I could definitely get used to. I smiled because I wasn't sure what else to say. He was a royal, I was not. Speaking of, how's your mom? Anselm's face grew sad, the light in his eyes disappearing. "I got up to check on her earlier while you were sleeping. She's been given a sleeping draught to help with the pain, so she wasn't awake when I visited, but she's still very unwell. The doctor has called for some of our family friends in the north. Hopefully they'll arrive soon, and we can get her the care she needs." I swallowed hard. That doctor, they wouldn't let me donate blood. Even though I'd wanted to. Even though I'd practically begged the doctor to let me help her. I could still hear her piercing scream as she fell. The crack as her skull hit the wall. I'd never been so terrified or frozen in fear before. One moment she'd been laughing about some story she was telling me, then next she was hurtling to seeming death. He smiled softly at me, not knowing the turmoil within my thoughts. "He was right to make that decision. You and the baby need your blood more. King Damon has 2 half-brothers, both of whom married humans. They're the friends we're waiting on. They'll help by donating blood. I'm sure of it." I couldn't help but frown up at him. "How come there are so many fated mates that are human? Don't you have enough dragon women here?" Anselm's smile reappeared. "We don't actually know why the pattern has emerged, but there's definitely more human blood in the royal lines than ever before. And after this baby is born, there will be even more." I slid my feet into my shoes and followed Anselm out of my bedroom. We took a few steps, then moved over to the room next door. His suite. "Come in and sit while I change," he said, taking my hand and leading me into his room. My heart beat a little faster as I took a step into Anselm's bedroom. It seemed familiar somehow, which was impossible. I'd never been in here before. The bed was huge, with dark, ornately carved wood and royal blue sheets and blankets. It was very masculine and suited him somehow. Anselm stripped off the robe he'd been wearing, revealing his perfectly sculpted back and ass, then strode into the large walk-in wardrobe. My pussy ached at the sight of his nakedness in ways it shouldn't, especially after being so well satisfied only a few hours ago. I started talking to distract myself. "Will I need to vacate the room next door soon? When does your sister get back?" "Jessa?" Anselm asked, his voice coming from deep in the wardrobe. "She doesn't really live here anymore. She married the Crown Prince of the Black Mountains, and she enjoys living there most of the time." "A love match?" I asked, shocked I was even asking. Marriages for love were common in the place I was from, though there were parts of the human world that still married for reasons other than love. I had no idea what things were like here. Perhaps arranged marriages were more common than not. Anselm walked out of the closet, wearing pants, and his arms slid into his shirt sleeves, but his chest was still bare as he hadn't fastened the shirt. "Oh yeah. Fated mates, actually. Jessa wouldn't have married for anything other than forever love. She's like our mother, very forceful." I pressed my lips together so I didn't laugh. I can imagine. 2 girls as beautiful and vivacious as their brother. Yes, Jessa would be a force to be reckoned with, I was certain. "What about your younger brother?" I asked. "Where's he?" "Away working," Anselm answered, moving to the mirror to finish dressing. "There are 5 kingdoms in this realm, and Ian loves the warmer weather, so he tends to work for Vlakid, one of Father's oldest friends. His castle is in the warmest part of our realm, though I wouldn't exactly call it warm. More like less freezing than here." Another wave of sickness grabbed at my belly, and this time I dry-retched, loudly. "Are you okay?" He twisted back around super fast, concern in his gaze as he studied me. I nodded, swallowing rapidly, unable to talk. "Let's get you something to eat." He took my hand and gently led me down the hall. The carpets were so soft beneath our feet, and the walls so beautifully decorated with art, I took my time gazing around me. But Anselm wasn't being deterred by my staring and looking around. He got us down to the dining hall quicker than I would have thought possible. "Did you take a shortcut?" I asked, looking around, confused. He chuckled but didn't answer, instead directing me over to the large dining table. I hadn't expected to find anything other than a bowl of fruit on the table, but there was a whole host of things for what appeared to be an afternoon tea. "Were they expecting people?" I asked, sitting in the seat Anselm pulled out for me at the dining table. "No." He walked around the table, then sat directly opposite me. "The staff always set up grazing tables for us, in case we have visitors." I marvelled at the spread of food. Fresh warm rolls, pots of butter, danishes and pastries, jugs of juice and wine. "Does it all go to waste if no one eats it?" Anselm laughed. "Waste? Here? No way. My mother wouldn't have that." His smile quickly became a frown when he mentioned Lucy. I wanted to reach out and touch him, to console him, but the table was too wide for my reach. Instead, I asked, "What do you mean?" I took a pastry and nibbled on it, enjoying the buttery texture and feeling the lingering nausea recede. Anselm poured himself a glass of water and grabbed a bread roll. "I mean, my mother would never let anyone starve or let food go to waste. She was a childcare worker when she lived in the human realm. She struggled for money and came from a poor family. Now that she is queen, she makes sure that no one in our kingdom goes without. If this food isn't eaten within 2 hours, the servants would either pack it up to take home with them or offer it to the people in the village. Mother keeps a list of women whose mates have died or people who are sick, those in need. And the servants help distribute whatever is left to the needy." I smiled at the respect I heard in Anselm's voice. "Your mother sounds like an amazing woman." "She is," he said. Our eyes met, something soft and warm bubbling between us. A growing understanding. Maybe more. "Kayla, Voices made a loud kerfuffle in the hallway. I turned toward the sound, then the doors to the dining room burst open, and what seemed to be a horde of people flooded the space. The men were dressed in nothing but the robes I knew the servants kept for the dragon shifters when they landed. But the ladies were both dressed in thick, warm dresses. I stared at the beautiful women, older than me, but obviously human. Anselm rounded the table and held out his hand to help me to my feet. "Sarah," Anselm called, a note of relief in his tone. "And Katerina. You both came." The 2 human women bustled over, worry lines creasing their foreheads. "Of course we came. It's Lucy, after all. How is your mum?" Anselm went on to describe Lucy's current situation. The woman named Sarah frowned at Anselm. "Then we'd best get in there fast. It sounds like she needs blood now." Anselm nodded. "She's stable for now. Dr. Tony has her on some meds that are helping, but I'm sure the doctor, and my father, of course, will be relieved you're here." I watched the women as their husbands stepped up and wrapped strong arms around their waists. Both of them looked content. They and their husbands looked right for each other somehow. They seemed happy. They certainly didn't seem beaten down, overstressed, or kept against their will. They moved with confidence, their husbands chatting in the background, with no need to take over as their wives spoke with Anselm. I wanted to know more about these human women and their marriages to their fated dragon princes. But now wasn't the moment for that. Lucy needed them, far more than I needed information about dragon shifter marriages. Anselm reached for me and drew me closer. "Kayla, this is Katerina and Sarah. They're married to the two dragon shifters you see over there, Dmitri and Lucian." The two men turned to smile at me when they heard their names, and I couldn't stop the heated blush that stole up into my cheeks. They were both older, much older than me, but still imposing and handsome men. "Nice to meet all of you," I managed to mumble. The woman with lighter hair and a big smile, Sarah, nudged Anselm. "You've got a human mate too, and have wasted no time in creating the next heir to the throne, I see. When are you due, Kayla?" Heir to the throne? What? Oh my God, that's what he'd been talking about. Anselm was his father's heir, the next king. That would make our child the heir to all that was around me. All that wealth, all that responsibility. I need to sit down. I staggered backwards as a fresh wave of nausea hit me. Sarah grasped my hand, helping me to sit in one of the dining room chairs behind me. "Not long to go by the looks of that. Are you in pain? Cramping at all?" I shook my head. Not at the moment. Though I was always in some degree of pain or cramping, it never seemed to progress to anything more. The two women looked at one another, then back at me. Katerina patted her husband on the arm. "I'm going to find the doctor and offer my blood up first. Sarah, stay with her. I won't be long, and then we can switch and you can give blood for Lucy, and I'll stay with Kayla." "Me?" I said, not wanting any fuss. I managed to choke through the strange wave of sickness. They were worried about me. "I'm fine. Please, both of you, go find the doctor and help Lucy." But Katerina wasn't listening to me. She was already sweeping out of the room, taking the two men with her. Sarah sat down beside me on the chair to my left and reached for some of the cut-up fruit on one of the platters. "You're close to giving birth for the first time, in a castle, far away from home. Kat and I remember that feeling far too well. We're here to help. Not just Lucy, but you too." For some reason, her words, coming from a complete stranger, hit home hard. Thank you." Lucy was obviously not going to be able to be there for me through this birth any longer. She was hurt and needed the doctors far more than I did. "Of course," Sarah said. "We're all a little excited, to be honest. To hear there will be 2 babies in this castle soon. More than 2, maybe. Stavrock and Lucy must be thrilled to pieces to have grandchildren coming, and so close in age." "Who else is pregnant?" I asked, my heart squeezing tight. Anselm couldn't have impregnated another woman, surely. "My sister Jessa is 7 months pregnant," Anselm answered quietly. "As I mentioned, she's married to the Prince of the Black Mountains." I nodded. He'd already told me something about them. "Oh, yes. Sorry. I really need a family tree or something to keep everything straight, especially with the fog of pregnancy brain in my head." Sarah laughed and went on to tell me about her half-dragon babies and how much she loved living in the north. It was lovely to see and hear that another human woman had obviously made her home here, but I had more questions for my prince before I committed to staying. And whether I stayed or not was completely up to how he answered those questions. Chapter 13. Anselm. Sarah and Katerina's blood donation seemed to make all the difference to Mom's condition. I visited her rooms again after the doctor administered the transfusions, and this time she was awake, albeit very sleepy. There was a tinge of pink in her cheeks, too, that had been missing last time I stopped by. My father, seated by her side at their bed, seemed less agitated than before. That in itself was telling. She had turned the corner, thanks to the transfusions. "You look so much better, Mum." "Oh, Anselm." She blinked sleepily at me. "I'm fine." "Don't fuss, please." Her eyelids fluttered closed, as if even that was too much energy to expend. I bent and kissed her forehead, being as gentle as I could. "Take care, Mum. Rest as much as you can." "I'll make sure she does, son," Dad said gruffly, and in his tone I heard the relief. I think it wasn't until that moment that I realized how ill my mom had been. It was a reminder of how frail humans were compared to dragon shifters. Humans like my mum. And Kayla, about to give birth. My heart skipped a beat as anxiety filled me. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Mom was fine. Or at least, she was going to be fine, eventually. And Kayla was surrounded by those who could support her through the birth. She had me for what it was worth. I would not leave her again. She would be fine too, I was certain. I clasped my dad's shoulder for a moment. "Mom's strong, Dad. She'll make it." My father nodded, his lips tipping up in a slight smile. "She is the strongest and most amazing woman I've ever met," he said, and I squeezed his shoulder again and left them there, heading straight back to find my beautiful Kayla. My mate was incredibly strong too. She had to have gone through most of her pregnancy alone and unsupported. Not anymore. She would no longer have to do anything alone. Sarah and Katerina were invaluable in helping me achieve that aim. Kayla seemed more content with them around, quickly developing somewhat of a friendship with the two human women. Watching my mate with the royals I grew up with was extremely enjoyable for my dragon. He was happy. She was here. Home. With me. But I could feel her continued reticence. The resistance. Her worry and anxiety that lay beneath the surface layer of her otherwise open smile. That evening, when we'd all said good night and everyone headed to their bed for the night, I took my mate's hand and walked her to her bedroom door. "I hope you enjoyed dinner tonight. You didn't eat much." Kayla placed a hand on her swollen belly and chuckled. "I ate heaps, but the baby doesn't let me fill up like I used to." I nodded, though I wasn't sure exactly what she meant. Perhaps the little one took up so much room her stomach had shrunk. Or perhaps the pregnancy was making her feel nauseous and therefore not as hungry. I didn't know much about pregnancy. "Would you like to sleep alone tonight?" I forced the question out, not wanting to ask it, in case she answered in the affirmative. I wanted Kayla by my side, always. She stared up at me, not speaking, but her eyes shone with questions. "I'd much prefer you in my bed," I told her, taking the leap and admitting the truth. "Or I would happily sleep in Jess's quarters again if you prefer it. Either way, I need to feel you beside me in sleep. But if that isn't what you want..." I trailed off, holding my breath while she considered my words. Eventually, she squeezed my hand. "I'm very tired." "Just sleep," I clarified, with a small laugh. "I wasn't presuming any more than that." She nodded solemnly. "Then I'd love to sleep with you in your bed." I couldn't contain the grin that spread across my face. "Wonderful. Come." I pulled her further along the hallway to my door, and together we walked inside. The royals can be very boisterous. I hope they haven't scared you off staying here. I walked around to my side of the bed, and Kayla wandered over to what would now be her bed forever. God's willing. "Oh no," she said, with a soft smile on her luscious lips. I loved them. The loud, happy family vibe. I never had that. It was really nice, actually. Especially seeing Katerina and Sarah here, so happy and content with their lives and their, dragon shifter partners. Like you and me. Well, you know. She blushed so prettily, her cheeks turning a delicate shade of pink that sent a spike of desire through my gut. I decided to let her off the hook about her and me. So you still liked them? Even when my father and his friends decided they would settle that noisy argument with an arm wrestle. That had been quite embarrassing in the beginning. My father and his friends, acting like children. I shook my head at the memory. Kayla laughed. That was very entertaining, actually, she admitted, beginning to undress. She took her sweater first, then unbuttoned the dress she'd donned for dinner. It had buttons down the front, so my mate didn't need my help getting out of her outfit this time. Entertaining? You mean embarrassing? She laughed again, giving me a genuine grin. Oh, I thought that was great, she said with a chuckle. They're all so fit still. Human men, as a general rule, don't look that good at their ages. What are they, 60? My father is 65, I told her. Wow! Unexpectedly, a spark of jealousy kindled in my gut at her reaction. I knew it was ridiculous, but I didn't want her admiring anyone other than me. Now who's being childish, Anselm? I gave myself a silent talking to. That is, I did until Kayla pushed the dress from her shoulders and slid it down her arms, revealing her breathtaking body. Then my mind simply turned to mush. Wow is right, I said, staring at her lushness, my fingers itching to reach out and caress her beautiful curves. Her breasts were swollen and beautiful, her nipples long and erect. If she wasn't so tired, I would have pulled her beneath me and made love to her all over again. Kayla turned away, scrambling to cover herself with one of my robes. Oh, please don't, I begged. There's nothing more beautiful to me than your body, especially at the moment. Lush and curved and carrying our child. Kayla froze, then slowly turned back to me. Her hands moved away from covering her breasts to cup her belly. Really? Hell yes, I said, then shot her a wry grin. Or did this afternoon not prove how desirous you are to me? I dropped my pants and straightened once more, showing her my cock that was thickening by the moment and standing to attention. You're incredible, Kayla. I find you so very sexy. Would you like more proof? She shook her head in response to my question, but her gaze landed squarely on my groin, taking in my erection and growing hunger evident on her face. I stood still and let her explore my body with her eyes, only just resisting the urge to give her a little twirl. When her gaze reached my chest, she stopped there. I never asked about your tattoo. What is it? My hand came up to my left pec. It's not a tattoo. It's a birthmark. All the firstborn male dragon kings have them. My dad, Eric. It's beautiful, she mused. What about Dmitri and Lucian? I threw back the covers and climbed into bed. It was obvious we were just going to talk tonight, and that was fine. I loved the idea of getting to know my mate better on every level, not just sexual. No, they're second and third born, plus they were the sons of their father's mistress. I don't know how the birthmark knows, but hang on. I'm certain Eric has one, and he was second born and to a mistress as well. Kayla slid under the covers, pulling the blankets up over her belly and to her breasts. I pushed the blankets down a little, revealing her huge breasts and reaching out to caress her nipples. Kayla rolled onto her side facing me, giving me full access to her body. Maybe the mark knows who is going to end up king. I ran my fingers over her nipples, then down to her large belly. That would be even more magical. And in that case, my younger brother won't be king. He doesn't have one. I guessed she might be onto something, because the pattern fit. I frowned at her as I pressed against her belly. Your stomach is rock hard. Is it painful? She shook her head. Not really. A little crampy, but it's fine. I wasn't sure what to make of that statement, but since I had no plans to leave Kayla's side until she gave birth, I decided to try not to worry about it too much. Are you apprehensive about the birth? I asked her. She bit her lip and sighed. I am, but I'm so ready to meet my Bubba. Our baby, I corrected her, and she frowned as though the words didn't suit her. Yes, our baby. A wave of pain and sadness passed over me at her pained look. Why do you say it like that? You sound disappointed that you have to share our child. Oh, it's not that. She rushed to explain. I'm glad you're back, for the baby's sake. He or she will be a lot happier having you in their life in some way. And your parents, too. They're amazing. Every word was like a shot to my gut, making me ache and want to be sick. Kayla, you talk as if you're moving back to the human world tomorrow and will be welcome when we visit. I want you to stay here and marry me. Be my queen. Her gaze dropped open. Why? She whispered. Why? I repeated. Hadn't I already answered this question? Didn't she know? Because you're my fated mate. We're meant to be together. You're about to give birth to my heir, and soon. We should be married. It makes sense, doesn't it? She nodded, and the shimmering in her eyes immediately turned to liquid as tears spilled over the edges and down her cheeks. Yes, it does make sense. She wiped at the teardrops. Then why are you crying? I asked. Surely nothing I'd said was cause for sadness. I want you, Kayla. I want to marry you. Are you not happy to hear that I want to be with you? You want the baby, she gulped out. And you only want me because some mythical force has told you that I'm the one. Did she really think that? That's not it, I declared, cupping her face. I went to bed with you all those months ago because I desired you. My dragon shifted uncontrollably because he recognized his mate. She nodded, but her tears were still falling. I hated that I'd upset her. Marianne told you that I was your mate, she said. As you said before, you didn't recognize me to begin with. You left me the first time, when you didn't know I was your mate. No, well, yes. But I wasn't in my right mind or body that night. She smiled sadly, then leaned forward. But if I was truly your mate, wouldn't you have known anyway? I could barely hear her, she spoke so low. Had she actually said that? Or did I just imagine those words? I surged toward her, kissing her lips and tasting her sweetness. I hoped she could feel how much I wanted her. When she pulled back, I grabbed for her, but she was already sliding out of bed. I think I'll go sleep in Jessa's room. I sat bolt upright. Please don't leave. Whatever I said wrong, I'm sorry. She picked up her dress and held it against her body like a shield. That's the problem, Anselm. You don't see anything wrong with proposing to a pregnant woman you don't even... She sighed, then turned away, grimacing and grabbing at her belly as though she was in pain. I tried again. Please stay here. Or I can follow you and sleep on the floor in your room. I don't care which way you want it. She stopped and turned towards me. You want to sleep on the floor? Hardly. I wanted to be pressed up against all her warmth and beauty. No, but I don't want you to be alone, in case you need me. I want to be near you, just in case. Her lips tilted down and her face pulled tight, but she nodded and climbed back into bed. You're right. I should stay here, just in case. I thought maybe she'd gotten the right message about my intent and desire for her. But after she climbed back beneath the sheets, she rolled away and presented her back to me. Not to spoon or cuddle, I was certain. Even so, I leaned forward and pressed a kiss to her shoulder. "Good night, my mate." "Good night," she whispered, and shuffled a little further away. I lay on my back and stared up at the ceiling, listening to the uneven breathing of my mate and hoping she would fall asleep soon. Two things rolled around in my mind as I lay there. How had I screwed things up so badly? And how on earth was I ever going to be able to fix it when I didn't know for sure what I had done wrong? Kayla. I couldn't sleep. I could almost feel Anselm listening for my breathing to even out, so I pretended I was falling asleep until eventually he drifted off too. Anselm snored softly, lying on his back, but I couldn't get comfortable. When he rolled over to be closer and he threw an arm over me, hot and heavy, I stiffened. I hated it for a moment, feeling claustrophobic. Then when I realized he was still fast asleep and he had reached for me without conscious thought, I let myself shuffle back and enjoy the heat of his body, at least for a few minutes. Despite the stupidity in my heart, I had to admit it to myself at least, that I was totally in love with the Dragon Prince. I had been from the moment I'd first seen him. I'd spied him across the room, sitting at the bar, staring into the depths of a beer, as if the depth of life's answers were at the bottom of that glass. As soon as I'd laid eyes on him, my heart had begun to race, my mouth began to salivate, and adrenaline shot through my veins. I could have run a marathon at that point, and I wasn't one for the gym. I'd made my way over to him, well knowing that a man like that would never go for a girl like me. I was the fat chick, the big girl, the friend with a great personality. But Anselm had turned to me and smiled in a way that made my knees turn to liquid. I'd had to pull out a bar stool just so I didn't end up on the floor beside his feet, collapsed into a puddle. He'd bought me a drink, then another, then another. We'd talked about nothing and everything, and I'd taken the biggest risk of my life by offering him a place in my bed that night. I'd been terrified he'd turn me down. Say something like, "Oh, sorry, but I was just killing time until my super-hot girlfriend gets here." But he hadn't said anything of the kind. He'd walked home with me and stripped out of his clothes with seeming eagerness, and then blown my mind with the number of orgasms I'd been gifted that night. To wake up alone after a night like that had been the hardest blow of all. Sometimes I pretended I'd made him up. My perfect man. But when I'd missed my period and that stick turned blue, I had to be honest with myself. I hadn't dreamed up my perfect night. I'd simply been abandoned by my dream man. Somehow, I'd managed to put the pieces of my heart back together, focusing on the baby he'd given me. Something to love. Someone to make my life complete. The fact that Anselm now wanted to marry me seemed like the perfect end to our story. But the fact that he didn't love me and was marrying me purely out of duty killed me. I couldn't spend the rest of my life married to someone who'd made me his queen out of obligation. Obligation to fate. Obligation to the crown. And most of all, obligation to our baby. No, I could not let that happen. It would destroy me. Chapter 14. Kayla. The cramps across my lower abdomen were getting worse. I couldn't lie here any longer without crying out. Luckily for me, Anselm slept as heavily as I wished I could. I managed to get myself out from under his arm and stand up. My back hurt, and my belly was as hard as a rock. Ow! I waddled to the bathroom, peed, then stared longingly at the shower. Would it disturb Anselm if I had a quick wash? Oh! A huge cramp suddenly hit me, low in the belly, lasting way longer than any of the others. I bent over, breathing hard and trying not to groan. Then it vanished like it had never been. I rubbed the spot where I'd felt the pain and shook my head. If that was a prelude to what was coming, I wasn't looking forward to the rest. The shower beckoned. I wandered over and flicked on the shower head, this time not containing the groan as another wave of pain hit me, hard, and in the same spot as the previous one. Panic descended, and I tried to remember the books I'd read. I had to stay calm. This was a marathon, not a sprint. Natural pain relief. Hot water. Stretches. Stay on your feet. I stepped beneath the hot spray of water and turned to allow the shower spray to beat against my belly. Oh, yes. That felt truly lovely against my skin. When another pain hit, I turned to get some relief on my back. The baby wasn't moving too much at the moment, and now that I thought about it, he or she hadn't kicked much today at all. That's normal. They go quiet before the birth. I shifted around to let the water wash on my belly, then again so it poured down my back. I stayed that way for a long time, alternating back and front, breathing and counting, envisioning my body opening up to let my child out into the world. When the pain got too intense, I turned off the water and walked over to the bath. I could feel the panic rising, the fear of the unknown, of being out of control. I needed to calm down, and maybe a warm bath would help. I flicked on the bath taps and was staring down at the plug hole, wondering how I was going to get into the tub, when Anselm walked into the room. Still naked. Still beautiful. "Hey, sweetheart, are you okay? When I woke up and you were gone, I got worried." I nodded. "Yes, but I think I'm in labour." Anselm's eyes widened, then his face grew tight and serious. "What can I do? How can I help?" "Can you put in the plug so I can have a bath?" His intense look dissipated as he let out a laugh. "Seriously?" I nodded. "Yeah, I'm assuming I've got hours and hours to go. I need to relax a bit." He rushed over and bent over to put the plug into the bath. Then he held his hand out to me and helped me into the tub. "Thank you," I said, slowly sitting down and leaning back to rest my head. "I'll just throw some pants on," Anselm said, and disappeared. I closed my eyes and ran my hands over my belly. It was so uncomfortable. Good idea. The other women would arrive when this labour really took off, and I didn't think Anselm wanted Katerina or Sarah to see him naked. Truth be told, I didn't want them seeing him naked either. Another contraction hit, and I breathed through it, using more visualization and splashing some warm water onto my belly. I was calmer now. Whether it was the bath or Anselm's presence bustling around just out of eyeshot, I wasn't sure. Probably both. When Anselm rushed back into the bathroom, I opened my eyes just enough to see him. He adjusted the lighting to be dim so we could both see, but it was much more restful. "Are you hungry? Or thirsty?" he asked. "I'm not really sure what to do to help." I was grateful for his attentions, but I shook my head. "No, I don't want anything to eat or drink. I'm just going to rest here and breathe for a while. I'll let you know when I need you to go get Sarah or Katerina." He slid to the floor beside the bath and reached over to clasp my hand in his. The touch of his fingers curved around mine was soothing. I held on tight. After a few minutes, I lifted my head. "Why don't you try and get some more sleep? No point both of us being awake." He shook his head violently. "No way. I'm not leaving you. I'm not going anywhere." And he didn't. He stayed exactly where he was, sitting next to the bath and being quiet and comforting simply by his presence. For me. He chatted to me when I needed some distraction through the pains, and then climbed into the bath, trousers and all, and held me in his arms when I wasn't sure I could keep going. "You can do this, Kayla. You're amazing. You're doing so well." He whispered the words, kissing my forehead, which was now sticky with sweat. Then the pain changed. I rolled onto my side, then onto all fours, feeling a need to bear down. Yet I was terrified to push. I stared up at Anselm, frantic. "I need Sarah, or Kat, or your mum. Please, Anselm, please." He jumped out of the bath as another contraction ripped through me, grabbing hold of my belly and squeezing so hard it robbed the breath from my lungs. I cried out, "I can't do this! I can't do this!" Anselm ripped off his wet trousers and grabbed a pair of casual pants that were lying in the corner of the room, pulling them up quickly before reaching out to grab my hand. "You can, darling. Squeeze hard. Breathe, beautiful. Please, just breathe." I sucked in a lungful of air, vocalizing and groaning out my pain. The contraction peaked, then the pain began to subside. Oh, thank God. I relaxed into the water and looked up at him. "I'm okay. For the moment. Go. Quickly, please." Anselm turned and fled. I tried to stay grounded, stay calm. But with the next contraction soon to hit, I found myself tensing up way before I should. "Ugh!" I cried out, thrashing about in the water, trying to find a position, any position, that would be comfortable. The doors burst open, but I couldn't look up. I was too busy grabbing my belly and crying. "Oh, God! Something's wrong! Oh, God!" Anselm jumped into the bath beside me, clothes and all, his hand tangling in my hair. "Kayla, you're okay. I'm here. I'm back." Calm descended as I settled against him, and I took a breath. I was okay. I looked up and managed to focus enough to see who was in front of me. Sarah was there with a huge smile on her face. "You aren't far away, Kayla. When you think you're going to die, you're almost done. That's comforting." I let my head drop down once more and took a few careful breaths. My belly began to tighten again and I sobbed. Too soon. "It's coming back." Anselm pulled me against his body and held me tightly while I writhed against him. When that contraction was done, Sarah spoke. "Good girl. You're doing so well. Just remember that every one you get through, you never have to do again." I nodded. She was right. This was a marathon, and I was at least halfway, I was sure of it. "Do you want a water birth?" she asked. "Or should we get you onto the bed?" I didn't know. I couldn't answer that. "Anselm, after the next contraction, see if you can get her to stand up and over to the shower. I found that to be the best place to birth. Helps with the pain and we can see the baby a lot better. I'll get the doctor." Another contraction snuck up on me, too fast. "Ugh, no!" Anselm was there, whispering in my ear. "Kayla, beautiful woman, you're doing so well. You're going to see your baby soon. So soon. Good girl." This time, when the peak crescendoed, I let go of the stress as soon as I began to slide down the mountain of pain, relaxing all over. I could open my eyes this time. "I want to get into the shower," I confirmed. "But the baby, the tiles." "I'll get the mattress," Anselm said, standing up and lifting me into his arms without any seeming effort on his part. "Let's get you into the shower first." "Yes, please." I knew the next contraction would wipe me out. I wouldn't be going anywhere soon. The heavy pressure on my pelvis was so intense and scary. But once I was in the shower, the pulsing of warm water against my back and belly helped with the pain, making it bearable once more. Anselm disappeared briefly into our bedroom, then reappeared, dragging the king-sized mattress beside him. I would have laughed at the sight if I'd been able to. "Thank God the shower is huge," was all I could think. "Move just a little, beautiful. I'll put this under you." "The mattress," I managed to pant. "It'll be ruined." Anselm put the mattress on the ground and pushed it straight into the huge shower, the water beating down on the sheets that he hadn't taken the time to remove. "I'll buy you another. Whatever you want, Kayla." I nodded, then fell to my hands and knees on the soft mattress, crawling back over to where the warm water was flooding the sheets. The next few hours became a bit of a blur as I retreated inside my own mind. Breathing hard, squeezing Anselm's hand and listening to his whispered words of reassurance. When the doctor arrived, I was starting to panic. "This feels all wrong. The pains are on top of each other. I can't get a breath." I was sweating, even with the water now running cool. "Let me check to see how you're doing," the doctor said. "Can you lie on your back?" I was on my hands and knees, naked and terrified, but I still managed to glare at the man over my shoulder. "No, I can't fucking roll over. Are you serious?" Sarah cackled out a laugh. "He needs to check your cervix, sweetie. After the next contraction, see if you can do it, okay?" I didn't want to, but so far Sarah hadn't steered me wrong, so in between the intense pains, I rolled over and had the man stick his fingers up inside me. "Ow!" He stepped away with an apologetic smile. "You're fully dilated, Kayla. When you're ready, you can start pushing." A song of relief released inside my mind. I was almost there. "I don't want to be on my back," I declared, hating the feeling, like I was a floundering fish. "Roll back onto your knees," Sarah said. "It opens up your pelvis. Makes it easier." I didn't even stop to think. I rolled and pushed up on my hands and knees, my belly instantly feeling better in that position. I strained back, the need to bear down coming over me. "Anselm!" I called out, and he was immediately beside me. "What do you need, Kayla?" "You," I panted. "Just you. Stay there, okay?" He nodded and stayed exactly where I could see him and lean on him as I needed. The pressure between my legs was intense, and I listened to the doctor as he told me to gently push. Not strain. Breathe the baby out. I wanted to roll my eyes at him, but instead I listened, slowed everything down. Every time the contraction came, I grabbed that pressure and used it. Pushed down. It was a relief to finally do something with the pain. Not just sit around and endure. "I can see the head, Kayla. A few more pushes and you're done." I was exhausted, my face wet with tears and sweat. But Anselm was there, kissing my forehead and telling me what a great job I was doing. Even if I didn't believe him, even if I thought I sucked, I was almost there. My baby, our baby, was almost here. I pushed down and cried out as the baby's head pushed through. I couldn't wait for the next contraction. I bore down, and the baby slithered free of my body. I collapsed forward on the mattress, the pain finally gone. "Oh, sweetheart, you did it. You did it," Anselm said, still with me, lying down next to me on the mattress. "What is it?" I asked, barely able to lift my head and look up. "It's a baby." His eyes were still locked on me. "And you are the bravest, strongest woman I've ever known." I had to turn over. I wanted to see my baby. "Help me," I said, and Anselm did. He rolled me over and sat up behind me, giving me a wall of strength to lean on as the doctor handed me my infant, wrapped in a white blanket, squirming and angry-looking. "Your son," he said. "The next in a long line of dragon kings." I took my baby in my arms and stared down at his perfect face. If he wants to be, he can be anything he wants. Anselm kissed my face. "I am so proud of you." I pushed open the blanket to take a better look at my son. 2 perfect little hands, a scrunched-up face, and the most beautiful little cry. When I stared down at his chest, I couldn't look away. It was tiny, but it was there. The beginning of the royal birthmark that dictated the next king. Chapter 15. Anselm. The doctor cleaned up Kayla and the baby, then we all climbed into Jess's bed to rest. I couldn't believe the effort it had taken to push him out. Kayla was amazing, and I was in awe of her and our new perfect son. He is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Kayla stared down at the baby in her arms. She was sitting up against the headrest, the baby dressed warmly and drinking from her breast. "You are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," I told her, staring at her as long as I could, wanting to imprint the image on my mind. Kayla smiled at me, and for once I couldn't see even a hint of anger or irony. "You're just saying that because I'm holding our baby?" I chuckled. "No. I would have said that before you gave birth. But yes, seeing our son feeding from you like that, wow. I never thought I could love you more, but I was wrong." "You what?" I sat up, wanting to hit myself upside the head for revealing that snippet too soon. "Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything yet." She turned toward me, cupping the baby's bald head in her hand to hold him in place against her breast. "What do you mean?" I smiled and shrugged, feeling foolish. "Marianne and Eric said I shouldn't declare my love for you yet. That you would need time to feel it as I do." Kayla stared at me like I had 2 heads. "What?" I asked. "Don't tell me they were right." Damn it. Kayla shook her head so fast the baby let go of her breast and squawked in protest. "Oh, I'm sorry, darling. Here you go." Kayla crooned to the baby, guiding him back to her breast. When she looked at me, this time I saw a warmth I hadn't expected to see. No, they weren't right. Not at all. Tell me again how you feel. Be honest, please." I leaned against the backrest and tilted my head toward her. "I love you, Kayla. I have loved you from the first moment we kissed. That first night together was the best night of my life. I dreamt about it for months, and I stupidly thought I was wrong about my feelings for you. So I fought them. I tried to forget you, even though I couldn't. But I wasn't wrong. You are the one. And now, seeing you with our baby." I gestured and tried not to let tears blur my vision. It wasn't manly to cry. But the depth of emotion I had for her and the tiny baby in her arms was far beyond anything I could ever have imagined. Seeing you both here, in my bed, holding you both in my arms, I can tell you the love has grown even when I didn't think it possible to love you more than I already did," I whispered. Kayla was still staring at me, unspeaking. But she didn't look upset. In fact, her eyes shone with happiness. "I know you probably don't care for me in the same way." I rushed to reassure her. "Humans don't feel the fated mate bond the way we do, but I promise you I will do everything in my power to show you every day that I love you. And hopefully one day you will return the feelings and agree to be my wife." However long that took. The baby had fallen asleep now, and Kayla picked him up to put him over her shoulder and rub his back. "Do you want to hold him?" I nodded. "Oh yes, please." With all the commotion and health checks, feeding and dressing, I hadn't had a moment to hold my son properly yet. I held out my arms, and she carefully transferred the tiny little weight into my hands. He was warm and snuggled against my chest. My heart broke and was completely remade in that moment. I was a father. This was my son, and I would die to protect him. There was a knock at the door and Sadie came in, bearing a tray of food. "I've brought a late breakfast and a guest who won't be turned away. I swear he is about to knock down the door to meet his grandson." I laughed, imagining my father pacing outside the bedchamber. Kayla arranged her shirt she'd brought with her from the human world so that her breasts were now tucked away. I waited for her to be settled, then asked, "Is that okay? Or do you want him to come back after you've slept?" Kayla smiled and reached for a croissant from the brunch tray. "Your dad should meet his grandson." I turned to Sadie and nodded. The housekeeper didn't even make it back to the door before my father burst into the room. "Congratulations!" he bellowed, a smile on his face for the first time in days. He came straight around to Kayla and bent down to kiss her cheek. "Well done, Kayla." "Thanks." She smiled up at him. Dad, who looked grey and exhausted, black smudges under his eyes, walked around the bed to stare down at the sleeping baby in my arms. A strange look of awe crossed over his face. "It feels like only yesterday I was holding you in the same way. Though being a triplet, you and your sisters were tinier than this little fellow." He held out his hands and cupped them together. "I could hold you here." "Amazing they all survived so well," Kayla said. Dad laughed. "Survived and thrived, but they have a strong mother." Dad sobered then, sitting on the bed near my legs but not reaching for the baby. "How is Lucy?" Kayla asked, shifting the focus to my mom. "Oh, she's much better," Dad assured us. "The doctor is very happy with how she's healing, and I know she'll want to come up and visit you all soon." Kayla threw back the covers and stood up, arranging her maternity dress to cover her legs. "Do you know if she's awake? Maybe we should all walk down now." I gaped at her. "Kayla, you just gave birth." She narrowed her eyes at me. "Yes? And I have no stitches, no damage. I'm not sick. Let's go." I stared at my father, who looked just as surprised as me. Kayla grabbed one of the grey blankets from her baby bag, took the baby from my arms, and wrapped him up like a sausage. "Here you go, Grandpa." She handed our precious son over to my father. "If it's okay to call you that, do you have another nickname you'd like to be called?" My father, the fierce protector of the palace and guardian of our town, turned misty-eyed in the face of his first grandchild. Grandpa sounds good." "Are you right to carry him?" I asked my dad, jumping up and out of bed. It was my father's turn to glare at me. "I held all three of you every day for years, and Ian too, until you were too big to carry any longer. I'll be fine." He adjusted his hold on our baby, tucking him close to his chest and bringing him deep into his embrace. Kayla walked to the door, her belly seeming smaller already. "Let's go, then. I'm sure the Queen would like to meet her grandson as well." "I think she would too," I managed. The fact that Kayla was going out of her way to bring my mother such joy made me love her all the more. Together we walked down the hall, down the staircase, and along to the guest quarters. "How is she really?" I asked Dad, who had the baby tucked right into his chest. "She's improving," Dad said. "I've never seen her like this before. It's confronting." "Do dragon shifters have a different lifespan to a human?" Kayla asked, sounding curious. "No," I answered. "We live on average 80 years. However, we have more healing capabilities, so if we're injured, we tend to recover quicker." "Much quicker," Dad added. We reached Mom's bedroom door, and I faltered. I'd seen Mom in bed with a cold and after she gave birth to Ian. But that was it until this injury. She'd always been healthy. "Go on, Anselm," Kayla said softly. "Knock." I did as Kayla requested, though I couldn't remember the last time I'd knocked on a door in my home. "Come in," came the quiet response. My mother's strength was gone, and my gut ached to hear it. I pushed open the door and reached out my hand to Kayla, who took it and walked beside me. "Mom, so good to see you," I said, walking up to one side of the bed to give my mother a hug. She was lying on the left side of the huge bed. She was pale and looked like she'd lost weight, her cheeks more sunken than normal, but even so, she looked better than the last time I saw her. Kayla walked around the other side of the bed beside my father. "We'd like to introduce you to someone, Grandma." Mom struggled to sit up, so I took her arm and helped support her. "Oh, my word! Kayla! Anselm!" "Meet your grandson," I said, as Dad handed the baby over to Mum. "He's beautiful," she said, taking the baby in her arms and tears filling her eyes. "But I'm definitely Nana, not a grandma." Kayla giggled. "I can see that. Nana it is." I assumed that was some sort of human name for grandmother, so I just leaned over and kissed my son's forehead, loving the smell of him. "He is absolutely perfect," Mum said. "What's his name?" I glanced over at Kayla, who looked back at me with wide eyes. "We haven't talked about names. Kayla, did you have a name picked out?" A small smile lifted the edge of her lips. "I did, but it's not exactly a prince's name." "Tell me," I said. She blushed, a red-hot flush that covered her face all the way to the roots of her hair. "I played with the letters of your name, mostly. Hansel, Ainsley, Mason." Mother chuckled. "You two truly are meant to be." I glanced over at Kayla, who wasn't looking at me. Instead, she sat on the edge of my mother's bed, reaching out to our baby and touching him on his beautiful little face. I wasn't sure what my mother meant, but Kayla seemed to know. And I would obviously have to wait until we were alone to ask her. Mom asked Kayla lots of questions about the labour and cooed about how perfect our son was. My parents admired him for so long he got hungry again and began to root around and cry. "If you don't mind," Kayla said, tucking our baby up into her arms, "I'll feed him back in our rooms." "Of course, Kayla." Mom sighed and settled back into the pillows. "I think I'll have a rest. You should too." Dad nodded at me. "I'll stay here and see you both for dinner. Perhaps. If not, then I'll see you tomorrow. Your sisters will be here by breakfast, I'm sure. Good news travels fast." I groaned. I think I just lost access to my son for the foreseeable future. "And your mate," Mom chuckled. "Don't think your sisters are going to let her be." I put an arm around Kayla and led her from the room. "I think we're going to need to lock the castle doors. Maybe I can bribe Sadie to keep them away." Kayla giggled as we ascended the stairs once more. "What's wrong with your sisters?" I groaned. "You're an only child, right?" She nodded, the light of amusement twinkling in her eyes. "Then I really can't explain." We got to the door of her room, and I glanced over at my bedroom. "The mattress should be replaced. Shall we return to my room?" Kayla glanced up at me, then nodded. "Yes, I'd like that." I put my arm around her waist and led her into the bedroom I'd had since I was a small child. Tonight, we would sort out exactly what was stopping us from having the future we deserved. Come hell or high water, we would uncover the truth. Because Mom was right. Once my sisters arrived, I'd lose Kayla in the insanity, and we'd never sort out all our issues. Chapter 16. Kayla. Giving birth to my baby boy had been the most amazing experience of my life. One moment I'd truly believed I might die, then the next I was bringing another living being into the world. A perfect baby boy from within my body. I'd never felt such a high, such happiness. so much love. Not just for my baby, but for the man who gave me my son. The servants had changed over the mattress and remade the bed, purging all physical proof of the birth from the room. Even so, I could feel the energy in the room, the love, the warmth. I fed our son, loving the bond I could feel growing every moment with him. When he was asleep, passed out and milk drunk, I wrapped him up and placed him in the small cot the servants had placed by the bed. Staring down at his small face, it was hard to believe that one day he'd be a king, the next ruler of this incredible place. But would it be the right thing to do if we stayed? On the other hand, now that he was born, could we leave? What right did I have to separate him from his birthright? What are you thinking, beautiful? I glanced over at the father of my child. Just that this is the baby's home. He needs to stay here, to learn about his heritage, about shifting. Oh, God. He won't be safe in the human world. That hadn't really occurred to you before, had it? Anselm asked quietly, correctly reading my face. Though I have to tell you that with our son being only a quarter dragon shifter, it is possible that he won't inherit the gene. I almost rolled my eyes at him, but realized quickly enough that it would be rude. You saw his chest, right? He's got the birthmark. Anselm's eyes widened. The Dragon King mark. I nodded, realizing maybe he hadn't seen it. Anselm had been staring intently at me when I peeked at our baby's chest. The little one had been covered up by the time Anselm held him. Yes. So I don't think he's going to be a non-shifting human type. Anselm inhaled sharply. Then that means he'll be the next king of this kingdom, after me. I nodded again. So you see, I don't really have a choice. And that was a feeling I didn't like. In fact, it made the independent woman in me downright devastated. Though it was hard to feel sorry for the life my son would lead. He would be revered. He would be loved. You do have a choice, Anselm whispered, sliding up the mattress to sit next to me. If you want to go back to the human world, I'll come with you. We can raise our son as human if you want. I may need to fly back on occasion for my health. It's not good for a dragon shifter to stay in a human body for too long. But I wouldn't be gone long. What about your reign? I asked, horrified he'd even consider such a thing. You can't leave. Of course I can, he said. It isn't done very often, but my sister Vanya is very capable of becoming our queen. My jaw dropped, and no words came out. He couldn't be serious, and yet he looked it. Anselm continued, I'll do anything to be with you, Kayla. I love you. I never want to be separated from you, or our baby. Ever. I still wasn't able to get my thoughts into line, let alone speak. He couldn't really be saying he'd give up everything. His whole life, even his throne, just for me. Of course, if you don't want me in your life, then that changes things. I don't know what I'd do then. Die of heartbreak, probably. He chuckled and threw me a smile to suggest he was joking, though I wasn't sure that was really true. I could feel the tension beneath the words. So I suppose I need to ask you what you want, Kayla. Because you always have a choice. What you do with your life and our baby's life is for you to decide. I didn't think that was fair either. Anselm hadn't chosen to impregnate me, nor had he had a choice in keeping the pregnancy. So far it felt like most of the choices had been mine, though I respected the hell out of the fact that he was trying to share those responsibilities with me now. I'm not sure what to say, Anselm. I didn't want him giving up the crown. I didn't want him moving to the human world with me. What was I going back for anyway? A lackluster job and no family connections. He was offering to come with me to the human world, but what was there for either of us? Tell me if you want me, Kayla. Please. Tell me if you think you could love me. If not now, then one day. That's the only important thing, and changes every part of this plan. I couldn't contain the sob that rose in my throat. Of course I love you, I whispered, while covering my mouth with my hand. I have loved you since the moment I met you. I've loved you forever. Why do you think I kept the baby? I couldn't. The words were impossible to say. My throat closed up when I tried. When I'd found out I was pregnant, I'd been both devastated and elated. I had a piece of Anselm to love forever. Even though he'd left me after only one night, I'd never been able to forget about the love we'd shared and the things he'd made me feel that night. I'd wanted to hold on to that memory forever, and I had. Anselm reached out for me, his hands moving up my arms to my face. He lifted my chin so I could look up at him. I hadn't even realized that I'd been staring at my hands in my lap. "You love me?" he asked, his tone soft and incredulous. I nodded, tears filling my eyes and spilling down my cheeks. "But I never thought you'd love me back." "Of course I love you," he exclaimed. "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever known. Here." He lifted his hand and touched my temple. "Here." He touched my nose. "And here," he said, pressing his hand to my left breast where my heart was. "I know you didn't grow up thinking you'd be the queen of a dragon realm one day. But I grew up knowing that I would marry a woman just like you, Kayla. With your generosity of spirit, your tenacity, your strength, your heart." The words were everything I'd ever dreamed of hearing from him, all said with more sincerity than I'd imagined possible. Then he grinned. "And the fact that you make my cock hard and my heart race because you're so fucking sexy, well, that's more than a bonus. That's amazing." I couldn't help but laugh as I wiped away the tears. "But the fated mate thing," "is a blessing," he said, interrupting me. "It's a gift, Kayla, not a curse. Fate isn't making me bond with you, forcing me to marry someone I can't love. Quite the opposite. She's an old wise lady, slapping me upside the head, saying, 'Can't you see what's in front of you?'" He shrugged. "Sometimes we need it. Us men can be a bit dumb." That made me giggle until I could barely stop laughing. "Well, if that's all it is," I responded. "A nudge in the right direction." "That's all it is," he agreed. "Trust me. I've waited all my life for the right woman, Kayla. I wouldn't suddenly just marry you because you had my son. That's not the way we do things around here." "That's not how they do things in the human world either," I admitted. "Especially not in the last few decades. I had 2 friends who were single mums because their baby daddies had just up and left them. No support, no maintenance, certainly no offer of marriage. Just gone." He grabbed my hands tight. "Then please believe me when I say I love you. I would die for you. And if you will stay, then please marry me, be my queen. I will spend the rest of my life proving to you how much I love you. I will be loyal to only you." That reminded me. I had to ask one more time. "So there really is no one else? I'm not going to be confronted with 5 kids and 3 ex-girlfriends any time soon?" Anselm sat up straight, then put a hand on his heart. "As far as I am aware, I have never fathered another child other than our son." I smiled and couldn't help it. He looked so earnest when he said it. I leaned in and kissed his beautiful lips. As a man, and a beautiful sexual man, declaring that was all I could hope for. "All right then," I said, nodding my head as a cloud of contentment settled over me. I could see my life now. If I stayed, our son would be adored. Anselm would love me, and I would love him. We would be happy. I was sure of it now. "All right?" Anselm asked. "All right, you'll stay? All right, we go?" I laughed, realizing that I really hadn't been very clear. "I'll stay here. With you." He dove for me, wrapping his arms around me and drawing me in for a kiss. I lifted my chin and kissed him back, moaning at the touch of him. God, I'd missed him. For all the time we'd been apart, and all the time before we met. I'd daydreamed about a love like this for most of my life, and to think it may have come true was too surreal. When he pulled back, it was to say, "Tell me you'll marry me. Today, tomorrow, next month, whenever you want. Just, please marry me." Of course I will. I could already imagine a plan for the when and how, and I knew it would be beautiful, just like our burgeoning relationship. I pulled him back for another kiss, giving him my whole heart along with it. Epilogue. 3 months later. Kayla. My plan for the wedding had been simple. Wait until Anselm's whole family was well enough to attend, which meant both Lucy and Jessa were well. I also wanted time so that my body was healed enough to have a proper wedding night. That took a little longer than expected. Jessa had given birth 6 weeks after me, and to twins who were doing very well. Lucy was finally back to her hurricane self, so we'd set the date, and it had finally arrived. Today would be perfect. Jessa hugged me for the millionth time. "I can't believe you're finally marrying my brother. It feels like I've waited for this day forever." I laughed at Jessa's antics. She really was the whirlwind of the triplets. "You've waited forever?" I asked, walking over to look in the mirror for the final time. "I'd say that's a slight exaggeration, my friend." Vanya's head appeared in the mirror, popping up over my shoulder. "We'll officially be your sisters soon. Then you'll never be able to get rid of us." "Who says I'll ever want to?" I answered, poking my tongue out at her. "I really don't want to ever be rid of them." Jessa and Vanya had embraced me as their family from the very first moment we'd met. The fact that I'd given birth to their nephew might have had something to do with their instant support, but I doubted it somehow. These women were loyal to a fault, and their love for their brother shone through every day. "How's the beautiful bride going?" King Stavrock asked, stepping into the small room. "I think she's ready," Vanya said, with a clap of her hands. I adjusted the small tiara that sat upon my head and stared at my image in the mirror. My new sisters had done a great job getting my straight brown hair to look nice in an updo, with ringlets and flowers adorning the strands. The dress I wore was Lucy's wedding dress, which I'd been honoured to be allowed to wear. Lucy, like me, was more on the curvy side, especially as she'd been pregnant when she'd married the king. Vanya and Jessa were a smaller build and declared that they'd never wear the dress, so I was welcome to it. Sadie had altered it to fit my waist snugly, and today I felt as beautiful as a princess. Which, technically, I would be soon. "Yes, I'm ready." I turned to Anselm's father, who would be giving me away soon. "How's Rocky doing?" After many discussions, we'd chosen to name our son after Anselm's father, Stavrock II, who we all affectionately called Rocky. "He's sleeping like a champ," the king said, and offered me his arm. I took it, and together we turned toward the door that would lead me out to the wedding ceremony being held in the small cathedral at the palace. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Let's do it. Vanya and Jessa slipped out ahead of us, dressed in burnt orange, my lovely dragon shifter bridesmaids. When it was our turn, I didn't have a single butterfly in my stomach. Not one worried nerve. I was filled with excitement and happiness to finally be here and be marrying the man of my dreams. Everything felt so right. On King Stavrock's arm, I walked down the aisle. The cathedral was full to the rafters with people from the town. Family and friends had flown in quite literally from the north and the Black Mountains. All to see me, little human me, marry the next king. The Queen, Lucy, stood in the front row holding our beautiful baby boy. He was sound asleep, as he should be, despite all the noise around him. Standing at the altar was my prince, his eyes shining and very clearly only for me. I reached out my hand for him as we got closer, and he rushed to grab my fingers, drawing me away from his father and toward the priest, who would join us together forever. The ceremony was simple and much faster than I thought it would be. The feast afterwards was absolutely magnificent, and it was there that I finally got to meet the famous Queen Marianne. She walked toward our table with a soft smile on her lovely face, her long dark hair spilling down over her shoulder. "It is very lovely to finally meet you, Kayla." I stood up and rushed around the table to embrace her. "Thank you for sending him back to me." I'd long since stopped blaming fate for getting it wrong, or Marianne for telling Anselm what to do when he should have known all along. Marianne chuckled and gently hugged me back. "You are one lucky woman. Finding your fated mate is a blessing few of us can boast." I glanced across at the nearest table, where Stavrock was chatting with a handsome man with short dark hair. "Looks like you found yours too." She smiled softly. "Yes, but I had to endure quite a time before Eric came along. But that's a story for another night. Today is your day. You are officially Anselm's wife and the future queen of this kingdom." I covered my face with my hands. "That sounds insane." Marianne tugged my hands down and squeezed tight. "A gift, if I may." I glanced down at my hands where she held my fingers. "A gift?" "Yes. A future vision." I nodded before I'd really thought about it. Did I want to know the future? My head was suddenly filled with a dream. Anselm and I sitting on our large bed, greying hair and wrinkled faces. We were smiling and holding hands. Our children were around us. 4 of them. 3 sons and a beautiful daughter with dark curly hair. And before us on the bed was our first grandbaby, covered in the same white embroidered blanket that Rocky had worn today. Tears filled my eyes, and I blinked rapidly as the dream in my mind faded away. My vision returned, bringing with it the sights and sounds of our wedding day. Marianne was still standing before me, smiling brightly. "You have no need to fear, Kayla. Just keep loving your husband as you do, and your future will be beautiful." I wiped at the tears that slipped from my eyes. "I swore I wouldn't cry today." She chuckled. "Happy tears are always a good thing." Then she moved back to her table, leaving me with a contentment I hadn't known was possible. Anselm and I were going to make it. Our love would endure. Our children would thrive. Children, could I go through all that again? The pregnancy, then the birth. I glanced over to where Anselm was talking to other men, similar in age, holding our son proudly. Yeah, I can do that again. A gorgeous young man wandered up to me, his blue eyes identical to Anselm's. "Hey, Ian," I greeted my new brother-in-law. "Enjoying the wedding?" Ian grinned. "It's a great party, sis. You did well getting everyone here." I glanced around the room at the combination of royals, humans, and townspeople. "Yeah, there were a few people to coordinate, but it helps that you guys can literally just jump into the air and fly yourselves here." Ian broke into laughter. "Yeah, you're right." I glanced around the room, noticing a beautiful blonde girl staring at us from one of the far tables. "Hey, Ian, who's the chick casting daggered looks our way?" Ian stiffened and didn't even turn to see who I was talking about, because it seemed he already knew. "That's Veronica." Veronica. I narrowed my eyes, casting my memory back to the guest list. "Isn't she—" "Yeah, she's Damon and Cass's daughter, so technically she's a cousin." Well, from what I'd gathered, Cass wasn't a biological cousin of Stavrock's, so there was no blood link there. But still, I understood the connection now. "And she hates you because—" Ian's lips pulled tight. "Because I did something stupid a few years ago, and she hasn't forgiven me." There was a story there, and normally I would have loved to dig into it. But I wasn't sure I had the fortitude to deal with anything more today. So instead, I elbowed him in the side and said, "Sounds like you need a chat with Marianne too." Ian turned to stare at me, his eyes wide with surprise. Then the look of vulnerability disappeared to be replaced by his characteristic smirk. "Welcome to the family, Kayla. Officially." I reached out to hug him tight. Something about Ian made my heart sad, and I couldn't pinpoint what it was. "Thanks, bro." I had family now, and I loved it. Ian disappeared, and I was once again swept into the celebrations. When it was finally time to go to bed, I was aching for some alone time with my new husband. We were finally walking the hall to our marriage suite, and I clung to him like a limpet. "I feel like I haven't seen you all night." Anselm chuckled as he tucked me even closer into his side and opened the door to his bedroom. "I feel the same way. I've been counting the moments until I could finally get you into our new bed." Anselm had commissioned a new Super King bed frame for our wedding present, and we were still in the bedroom he'd grown up in. Jessa had moved her quarters to another wing so Rocky could be in the room next door, and everything was working out well. We would live in the castle for the time being. Lucy and Stavrock loved having the baby around, and I enjoyed helping my mother-in-law every day with her chores and learning the role of queen. I took a step into the bedroom, and my new husband pulled me back to the threshold. "Hang on a moment." He swung me up into his arms, and I grabbed for his neck, squealing like a banshee. "Oh my God! You can't carry me!" Even though I'd gotten most of my original shape and body back from before the pregnancy, I was still no lightweight. My dragon shifter husband laughed, crossed the threshold with me in his arms, and marched over to the new bed. "I certainly can." Then he tossed me onto the mattress, and I squealed once more. He walked back to the door and shut it, locking it tight. The sound reminded me that my baby wouldn't be beside us tonight. "I hope Rocky's okay with your sister." Jessa had offered to have the baby overnight, breastfeeding him as she would her own daughters. Anselm chuckled. "They'll all be fine. That husband of hers dotes on her. He'll help." I nodded. He was right. We had one night alone together, and considering it was way past midnight, it may only be a few hours until I held my son again. My new husband and I had better take advantage of the time we had together. I slid off the bed and turned my back to him. "Help? Please?" Anselm's confident fingers moved to the ties on my dress, releasing me from the confines. Then he turned me to face him. "I love you, Kayla. So much. I can't wait to start our life together from this moment forward." I reached up and cupped his face in my hands. "I love you, Anselm. I am so glad we met, and that you came back for me in the end. And that we have the chance to build a life together with our son." Then I released his face and stepped backward, shimmying out of my loosened wedding gown before shooting him a grin. I was wearing only a lacy pair of knickers and my smile. "But first and most pressing of all right now, I cannot wait for you to show me how much you love me." I felt bold, basking in his love, and I leaned forward and ran my fingertips over his trousers, where they were already beginning to tent. "You did say I had a certain effect on your body, did you not?" He chuckled, but there was a hoarse note that indicated my touch had the desired impact. "Indeed you do, beautiful Kayla. and I will be very happy to show you what you do to me, you sexy, gorgeous woman." When he finally collapsed against me, I held him tight, the vision Marianne had gifted me with flashing through my mind. We weren't just going to make it. Anselm and I would have a love story that would carry on through the ages. I finally felt like the other half of my soul had been found. Soulmates. A fated bond. It was real, and I knew at last that we would have our happy ever after for all the days of our lives.